Hey, who wants to hear a story? I have a good one. You like rabbits? It's a story about rabbits. Old Mr. Rabbit's Thanksgiving dinner. It is a discovery we make again and again, as if by accident each time. It gives us greater satisfaction to help than to be helped. For a child, this discovery, when first made, is a time when the important lessons that take one beyond the confines of ourselves. Old Mr. Rabbit sat in the door of his little house, eating a nice, ripe, juicy turnip. It was cold and a frosty day, but Old Man Rabbit was all wrapped up, round and round, with yards and yards of his best red wool muffler. So he didn't care if the wind whistled through those whiskers and blew his ears up straight. Old Man Rabbit had been exercising too, and that was another reason why he was so nice and warm. Early in the morning he had started off, lippity-clippity, down the little brown path that lay in front of his house and led to Farmer Dyer's corn patch. The patch was all covered with shiny red leaves. Old Man Rabbit scuffled through them, and he carried a great big bag over his back. In the corn patch he found 2 or 3 fat red ears of corn that Farmer Dyer had missed, so he dropped them into his bag. A little farther along he found some purple turnips and some yellow carrots and quite a few russet apples that Father Dyer had arranged in little piles in the orchard. Old Man Rabbit went in the barn, squeezing under his big front door and making himself very fat. And he filled all the chinks in his bag with potatoes, and he took a couple of eggs in his paws, for he thought he might want to stir up a little pudding for himself before the day was over. Then Old Man Rabbit started off again down the little brown path, his mouth watering every time his bag bumped against his back, and not meeting anyone along the way because he was so very, very early in the morning. When he came to the little house, he emptied his bag and arranged all of his harvest in piles and his front room, and the corn in one pile, and the carrots in one pile, the turnips in another pile, and the apples and potatoes in the last pile. He beat up his eggs and stirred some flour with them and filled it full of currants to make a pudding. And when he had put his pudding in a bag, he set it boiling on the stove. He went outside to sit, and while eating a turnip, thinking all the time what a mighty fine old rabbit he was, and so clever too. Well, while Old Man Rabbit was sitting there in front of his little house, wrapped in his red muffler and munching his turnip, he heard a little noise in the leaves. It was Billy Chipmunk, traveling to the old stone wall where he lived. He was hurrying and blowing on his paws to keep them warm. "Good morning, Billy Chipmunk," said Old Man Rabbit. "Why are you running so fast?" "Because I'm cold and I'm hungry," answered Billy Chipmunk. "It's going to be a hard winter, and very hard winter. No apples left. I've been looking all morning for an apple. I could not find one." And with that, Billy Chipmunk went chattering by, his fur standing straight out in the wind. No sooner had he passed Old Man Rabbit, he saw Molly Mouse creeping along the little brown path, her long gray tail trusting the red leaves as she went. "Why, good morning, Molly Mouse," said Old Man Rabbit. "Good morning," answered Molly Mouse in a weak little voice. "You look a little unhappy," said Old Man Rabbit, taking another bite of his turnip. "I've been looking and looking for an ear of corn," said Molly Mouse in a sad little chirping voice. "But the corn has all been harvested. It's going to be a hard winter, a very hard winter." And Molly Mouse trotted out of sight. Pretty soon Old Man Rabbit heard something else coming down by his house. This time it was Tommy Chickadee, hopping by and making a great to-do, chattering and scolding as he came. "Why, good morning, Tommy Chickadee," said Old Man Rabbit. But Tommy Chickadee was too much put out about something to remember his manners. He just chirped and scolded because he was cold and he couldn't find a crumb or a berry or anything at all to eat. He flew away, his feathers puffed with the cold until he looked like a round ball. And all the way he chattered and scolded more and more. Old Man Rabbit finished his turnip, eating every single bit of it, even to the leaves. Then he went to his house to poke at the fire in his stove and to see how the pudding was cooking. It was doing very well indeed, bumping up against the pot as it bubbled and boiled and smelled so fine indeed. Old Man Rabbit looked around his house at the corn and the carrots and the turnips and the apples and the potatoes, and then he had an idea. It was a very funny idea, and different from any idea Old Man Rabbit had ever had before in all his life. It made him scratch his head with his left hind foot and think and wonder, but it pleased him too. It was such a funny idea. First he took off his muffler. Then he put on his gingham apron. He took his best red tablecloth from the drawer and put it on his table. And then he set his table with his golden banded china dinner set. By the time he had done all this, the pudding was boiled. So he lifted it, all sweet and steaming from the kettle, and he set it in the middle of the table. Around the pudding, Old Man Rabbit piled heaps and heaps of corn, and carrots and turnips and apples and potatoes. And then he took down his dinner bell that was all rusty, because Old Man Rabbit had seldom rung it before. He stood in this front door and he rang it very hard, calling in a loud voice, "Dinner's ready! Dinner's ready! Come to dinner! Billy Chipmunk, Molly Mouse, and Tommy Chickadee." They all came, and they brought their friends with them. Tommy Chickadee brought Rusty Robin, who had a broken wing and had not been able to fly south for the winter. Billy Chipmunk brought Chatterchee, a lame squirrel, who he had invited to share his hole for a few months. And Molly Mouse brought a young gentleman, Field Mouse, who was all very distinguished looking because of his long whiskers. And they all tumbled into Old Man Rabbit's house and saw the table with the pudding in the center. They forgot their names and began eating as fast as they could, every one of them. It kept Old Man Rabbit very busy waiting on them. He gave all the currants from the pudding to Tommy Chickadee and Rusty Robin. He selected his juicy turnips for Molly Mouse and her friend, and the largest pile of apples for Billy Chipmunk. Old Man Rabbit was so busy he didn't have time to eat a bite of dinner for himself, but he didn't mind that. One single bite. It made him feel so warm and full inside to see the others eating. When the dinner was over, not a single crumb was left on the table. Tommy Chickadee hopped up on the back of his chair and chirped, "3 cheers! 3 cheers for Old Man Rabbit, his Thanksgiving dinner. Hurrah! Hurrah!" They all twisted and chirped and chatted, and Old Man Rabbit was so surprised that he didn't get over it for a week. You see, he had really given a Thanksgiving dinner without really knowing that it truly was Thanksgiving Day. Wow! How about sharing? Do we share? A good feeling that comes from it sometimes, to see those around us and to bless them. Well, that was a good story. I'll see you next time. We'll have another. Be good. Bye now.